We moved to Mountain in the summer 2019. I came to Canada 2003, and most of my time in Canada I spent in Ontario. Met my wife in Ukraine, married her in 2011. Then our daughter came 2012, and our son was born 2018. And then in 2019, a promotion opportunity came up at my work with a condition to relocate to Moncton. I went to check on a reconnaissance trip and liked what I found. So a few months later, we were in North Moncton. Well, we were moving on in peaceful times, let's put it that way. So there was no challenge for me. Like I was fluent in English before I came. My wife spoke some English, and she went to college. So it was normal life for normal immigrant, like nothing extraordinary. So we felt welcome anywhere we lived. Our kids enjoyed their own little children community. So it's a great life for us in Canada. You can see that some of them pretty much flee with clothes on their back, right? And some of them might not even have papers if they had to take off. Went to the bomb shelter and came back, and there is nothing left from their house, right? Besides from not having too much of material possessions to speak of, they are under huge psychological stress from trauma, and us here, we are worried, and them, it's a completely different level. So they definitely need support, emotional support. Well, right now it's a continuation of the war that started 8 years ago. 8 years ago, Ukrainian people overthrew the totalitarian president, pro-Russian president, whose authority and support of neutrality from majority of Ukrainian people was based on the fact that he promised to make Ukraine part of the European Union, and the first step for that was to sign association agreement with European Union. Meeting with EU summit was took place in November 2013 in Vilnius in Lithuania, and President Yanukovych made 180 and declined to sign the agreement. At the same time, it was made public that his government accepted $3 billion loan from Russia under conditions that they do not sign this cooperation agreement and join the Euro Union with Russia, Belarus, and Kazakhstan. And so that led to people going to the streets, especially in Kyiv. And it almost subsided within a couple of weeks until on November 30th, a few hundred Romanian protesters, students, were beaten up by the police. Very bloody situation. The next day, hundreds of thousands of people went to the streets. And this is how what we now know, Revolution of Dignity started. So people through December, January and February stayed downtown Kyiv, built encampment, police, security forces could do nothing with them. Until mid-February they started employing firearms, and over 100 of protesters died, but it immediately led to a response from the crowd, and Yanukovych was overthrown. He fled the country on the 22nd of February 2014. At the same time, We know that he was being supported by the Russian government. Security forces from Russia were noticed in Kyiv, and Crimean Peninsula, Ukrainian region, was focus of Russian effort. They could do that because of the majority of the population there was pro-Russian. That's true. Well, just like majority of the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia were pro-German, but it doesn't make annexation of Sudetenland less legal. Also, Crimean Peninsula was pretty much like favorite retirement spot for military personnel from Russia. Officers would retire and buy property there, and even so, it wasn't really legal, but Ukrainian government was not paying much attention to it. Suffice to say that the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine under President Yanukovych turned out to be a Russian citizen. And majority of ministers who fled with Yanukovych turned out to be in Russia. So immediately after the fall of Yanukovych, even before he fell, Russia started the Operation Annexation of Crimea. Later they issued a medal for return of Crimea, which was awarded to personnel, military and civil, who were involved in this. And interesting, Yanukovych fled on February 22nd, but the date of start of that operation for annexation is dated February 20th, 2 days prior his fall. Ukrainian garrisons were blocked by what was called little green men. So some people in looks like military uniform with firearms, but without any insignia. And for a year, Putin denied that there were any Russian personnel involved in this blockade. And only in 2015, on the first anniversary of the annexation, he said, yeah, we were helping Crimean people to conduct the referendum. The Ukrainian army at the time, after 2 decades of us being told, well, we have nobody to fear, why would we have a big army? We have friends, Russians our brothers, and European Union our friends. We don't need an army. It was a joke at the time in 2014. Ukraine had 5,000 battle-ready troops in February. So even if they wanted, they wouldn't be able to hold to Crimea. Plus, there was a lot of defection. We have to admit that, because the local units, garrisons in Crimea, lots of staff were hired from the local population, and local population, as I mentioned, were pro-Russian. Eventually, Ukrainian forces withdrew. Russians claimed that was a bloodless operation. Well, at least 2 Ukrainian servicemen were shot dead by the Russian snipers, sharpshooters. And the biggest tragedy happened to the Crimean Tatar people. It's an ethnic aboriginal population in Crimea. They suffered a lot under the Russian Empire, then under the Soviet Empire, and now again they are bearing the brunt of the Russian oppression, because Russian authorities understand that this is the least loyal population of all there. So there are constant arrests and people being sentenced like 15-20 years prison times for being involved in terrorist organizations. Well, most of it made up, as far as we can see, but it doesn't make it less horrible. Like previously in 1944, entire population of Crimea, well, Crimean Tatars and Greeks and Germans and Italians were deported by the Stalin government immediately after liberation of the peninsula. Crimean Tatars suffered the most because this is the only place where they live. Like Italians and Greeks, Germans, they have their own countries at least. Here, over 200,000 people were deported within 2 days. Around 10% of them died on the track to the Central Asia. And Stalin government, they deported dozens of nations: Germans, Kalmyks, Chechens, Ingush. In 1956, after Stalin's death, all those nations, they were pardoned and allowed to start returning back. All but Crimean Tatars. Those were only able to start moving in 1989. And again, because in USSR there was a registration system, you can't move between places without being registered at a new location, and you can't register there unless you buy a property, and well, rules were skewed in a way that you can't really, Crimean Tatar wouldn't be able to buy a property there. So 80 years later, pretty much they're suffering again. After this successful, let's say, operation in Crimea, Russia was very elated, and there was a lot of support for the Russian government, for Putin, in the eastern and southern regions of Ukraine. Propaganda worked well. Under Ukrainian President Yanukovych, Ukraine wasn't doing so well economically, so a lot of police were just lured by the salaries, like 3-4 times higher salaries for the Russian police. So they eagerly joined, switched the sides. So after Crimea, the unrest started brewing in the east, and people there were expecting that, well, same thing will happen. A little green man will move in and just will take over. Whereas we understand now that Putin wasn't interested in just Donbas, he was interested in the entire Ukraine, either joining or being destroyed. However, despite the unrest, there wasn't much of armed resistance, because people, well, they wanted maybe a better life, but not really were ready to die for cheaper piece of sausage. Well, I mean, they're not starving, right? So what happened on April 12, 2014, a group of Russian operatives led by a former, at least claimed to be former FSB officer, Colonel Igor Girkin, they seized the police station in Slavyansk in Donbas, 50 people in his crew, and they started armed resistance. Ukrainian forces, again, as I said, just 5,000 armed troops all over. So they were deployed in the south, being afraid that Russians will try moving from the Crimean peninsula in the continental Ukraine. So there was no army to speak of there. Police tried to do something, but some of them defected. Others were disoriented. So, and this is how volunteer movement started in Ukraine. People like myself, well, I wasn't there, and I guess my mom is happy that I was 11 years not in Ukraine by that time. They were joining the army troops or creating volunteer units just in their sneakers and jeans and t-shirts. And people started donating, like us, Ukrainian Canadian community, started sending money, to buy bulletproof vests, to buy helmets, like basic stuff. That in May we saw that this is no longer going to be a police operation, because the Russian terrorists, they already had the surface-to-air missiles. They started shooting down the helicopters, and it was going to be a war, as we can see. Ukrainian army came to somewhat normal self-awareness, and some units were formed with volunteers from the Revolution of Dignity as well, and they started moving along the Russia-Ukraine border in the east, trying to cut off the supply routes where arms were being brought to the terrorists. And what started happening, the Russian artillery started shelling Ukrainian troops from the Russian territory. And our guys were under the orders not to respond, because it would lead to open invasion. And we knew that we will be overrun by them. That's why that operation failed, and then eventually in 2014, in August 2014, Russian army was brought in in near little town of Ilovaisk, over 400 Ukrainian troops were killed in one day when they were encircled and promised a safe passage to leave that area as long as they stop fighting, and that turned out to be a shooting alley. Right? Well, few days from right now, we've been informed that Russian unit of paratroopers who committed the crime now been decimated near Kyiv. So we're pretty happy about that. Yeah, and not to forget that on July 17, 2014, Malaysian Airlines MH17 was shot down by the Russian terrorists. Now the court proceedings in the Netherlands, that's the only theory. Everything else has been dismissed after careful consideration. Again, Russia supplied the surface-to-air missiles going far above the normal range, what you can do with shoulder launcher, those Buk missiles. And probably, maybe they were trying to shoot down another transport aircraft from Ukrainian military, but they ended up shooting passenger aircraft. 297 people died, and smoking gun situation here is that Russian terrorists, they were very keen on publicizing all their successes. So they were making pretty much live commentary on the social networks. Oh, we, overtaken that city or destroyed that many tanks. And Igor Girkin, that former FSB officer, he published on his social network account, and we just shot down another Ukrainian cargo jet. It's laying down in the field, so they will learn the lesson now not to fly in our skies. The only aircraft shot down on that day was MH17. Nothing else came down from the sky. Later, they denied everything, but it was there. So now he's being sought by the court, and prosecution is seeking a life sentence for him. Yeah. So then Minsk agreements were signed between Ukraine and Russia. After that open invasion in August 2014, again, and Ilovaisk tragedy, we had not many troops to defend the rest of Ukraine. So we were forced to sign the agreement, ceasefire, to stop the front lines, to do the exchange of prisoners, to eventually remove all the foreign fighters from the soil of Ukraine. Well, in our mind it was Russian troops. In Russian mind they saw foreign mercenaries in Ukraine. Well, there were volunteers, we can say that. The people were coming from, Sweden and Britain and US, joining UA forces. There is a legal way to do it. But our concern was obviously the military from Russia, because the claim that was being maintained that it's an uprising, popular uprising by the people who deny Ukrainian authority. They're just regular coal miners, and all the ammo they have, they found them in the armed depots and in the coal mines of Donbas. Well, it's a proven fact that the actual commanding officers of those units, even though there were some sprinkles of coal miners there, were Russian officers. They were sent there undercover. Just before the the invasion happened a couple months ago, there was a publication leak of court documents in Russia where there was a corruption proceeding. Someone kept stealing the supplies for 35,000 troops in Donbas, and it was written black and white that the Russian army supplies were being misused and misdistributed. But now it doesn't matter as much. Over the course of this slow-boiling war, at least 26 active service members of Russian army were taken prisoners in Donbas and later exchanged. Putin accepted that, well, there were some military people taking care of special business in Donbas. So how much evidence do we need to act? I mean, Western democracies, because we have to say now, we kept saying that for 8 years that the sanctions launched after the annexation of Crimea, it was just a slap on the hand. There was even a caricature in Russian media with the launch unit of Iskander missiles, and it was saying, sanctions? No, don't make my Iskanders laugh, because this was really nothing. Like, if the sanctions like we are having now would have been introduced 8 years ago, that would have taken effect. This invasion would have happened. Otherwise, people in Russia were elated. They saw West is doing nothing. The support for Putin went up past 80%. And for 8 years, there was this constant brew, well, Ukraine is not really a country, Ukrainian people, they are just a branch of Russian people. They, made up history. They were invented by the military of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. all kinds of stories. When people are either uneducated or would like to believe what they hear, that's what they believe. 2019, President Volodymyr Zelensky was elected. 73% of people who came to the polls voted in his favor. He was elected as the promise of stopping the war. He was a supporter of the notion that, well, this war is only happening because there are also people in the Ukrainian authorities who want this war to happen. So now I'm here and I will stop the war. We will just tell our troops to stop shooting, and Russia will stop shooting in return. Well, unfortunately, it didn't bear the fruit, and I'm sure President Zelensky now is aware of some mistakes he made in the past. We declared numerous ceasefires. For example, there was a ceasefire declared for previous year, 2021. Over the course of that ceasefire, over 50 Ukrainian servicemen and servicewomen were killed. What kind of ceasefire is that? That was all based on the Minsk agreements. And again, Minsk agreements were signed between Ukraine and Russia, and Germany and France being observers. But Russia, while being signatory to that agreement, kept on insisting that Ukrainian government had to talk to the governments of those People's Republic, which, first of all, were not part of the agreement, and second, everybody knew they are puppets of the Russian government. Whenever one of the leaders issues one decree, for example, for evacuation or mobilization, the same day or day after, another leader issues the same decree, and so they just copycat each other and obviously follow whatever they're being told by the Russian government. Then, as you know, the Russian government issued this ultimatum, what we can call it, where Ukraine was demanded to declare their neutral status, and West was demanded to stop supplying any arms, either to Ukraine or to any other former Soviet republics like Baltics. And also NATO was demanded to move their lines back to the situation of 1997. Also, as for the neutral status, it wasn't issued just to Ukraine, it was issued as a blanket demand. So Finland became alerted because, well, they're also a neutral country. So did it mean that Russia now would like to influence the decision by the Finnish government in case they ever decide to join the NATO? Well, it's how it reads. So this ultimatum was obviously not something that the West was going and willing to sign now. So it was rejected, and but fortunately, Western governments, especially US, UK, Poland, started supplying some arms on a very intense basis to Ukrainian army. And within a couple of months, we got a few thousand of Javelin and NLAW anti-tank missiles, which definitely bumped up our defense capability. And you could see that within what happened in the past 5 weeks. It definitely tells you a lot. Having said that, it's not only the arms. Let's say in Afghanistan, they received 10-fold or 100-fold more arms supplies from Western democracies. However, there was not much will to fight. Whereas in Ukraine, despite whatever intel Russian government and Putin had, everybody was fighting. There was no pro-Russian unrest behind the Ukrainian lines. Russian-speaking cities were fighting and still fighting. Like Mariupol is a Russian-speaking city. Kharkiv, that poor megapolis in the east, 40 kilometers from the Russian border, majority population have some connection to the Russian neighbors. They are under horrendous assault, but they are fighting like hell. And we can say now that Russian troops moved without thinking much about supplies. Some of them were bringing the parade uniforms because the expectation was that they'll be welcomed with open arms, and in a few days they will have a parade in Kyiv. That didn't happen. Now fighting is, they're withdrawing from Kyiv because they're being decimated by the Ukrainian troops, but they're moving again to Donbas and going to probably finish off Mariupol, maintain the alliance in the south of Ukraine. So, unfortunately, my family is directly affected. My in-laws, they've been on the occupied territory since over 3 weeks, and we haven't heard from them over a week. And we know there is a pretty heavy fighting going on in the region there in the south of Ukraine. So I don't know how my wife is holding it together. Well, from my in-laws, we haven't heard from them. The area has no electricity. Lines been damaged, and also Russian troops, when they enter small area, like in the city they can't do that, but in a village they go collect everyone's cell phones and they destroy cell phone towers, so to make sure that there is no information about them is being shared. So my father-in-law, he just had a heart attack in January, so he had a surgery and stents implanted. Well, I would say he is lucky, because if it would have happened right now, he wouldn't have received the care he needed. And we know that he has some supply of those medications for several months, but he and his wife, my mother-in-law, they both suffer from high blood pressure. So we knew that those medications were being run low. Obviously, some basic stuff like they had food in the freezer. That food is pretty much gone now, unless they manage to salt it, that meat, right? Farmer, brought some 40 loaves of bread for the village. It's a small village. It's about maybe 500 people. He brought it a couple of weeks ago, and told them, well, unfortunately, that's my last run, because there are Russian troops in the area, and by now they understand that everybody local is hostile. So they see a civilian vehicle on the country road, they just shoot it up. They will ask questions later. And there was a car found with people killed inside. So yeah, even some basic stuff. And so that's for them. Less than 10 kilometers from my in-laws, there is a local administrative center, like maybe 10,000 people live there. Russians just bombed the military commissioner office, and their precision weapons made sure that House Street was wiped out too. Then they eventually entered that small town, looted shops and markets, and didn't allow people to leave, didn't allow humanitarian aid to be brought in. They would only allow to use local buses, and if there were vehicles not from the area coming in, they would seize them. So that kind of made it very difficult for supplies. Moving to the rest of my family there, so my wife's sister and her husband, my brother-in-law, and our niece, they're in Kiev. So all this time, they were spending time in the shelter, they live in the apartment building. But eventually they stopped going there because they live on the 11th floor, and it's several air raids, sirens in a day. It makes it difficult. So they now just stay in the hallway, away from the windows, hoping that if there is a hit, they will be lucky. We have tried to convince our niece to come over at least, because, men, they can't leave now. Men under 60 can't leave Ukraine. So she might come, but she doesn't want to leave her parents. It's a sad story. So they had an apartment in Crimea. They bought a condo where they would want to retire. Then Crimea was annexed. So parents of my brother-in-law went to live in that apartment. They were Russians. They actually came to Ukraine in 1990, I believe. So he's ethnic Russian. Last year, his parents contracted COVID and died within a week from one another. And because there is no stable communication, he had no idea they were, in such a bad shape. Like, he knew they were hospitalized, but his mom was on a mend, his dad was stable. He was trying to get in, but then because of this occupied border, he had to do the extra tests, so he didn't make it on time. Yes, only was able to come there for cremation. And then now he is in Kiev. Kiev is being shelled, hit by the artillery and missiles, and he calls his cousins in Russia, and nobody believes him. And as some just telling him, well, why don't you just surrender? Like, what's the problem? Like, we are going to liberate you. So it makes communication pretty difficult with extended family in Russia for him. So and he had COVID last year twice, so he has a gout. He's not really in fighting shape, but he's good with the sewing machine. So he's sewing balaclavas for the Ukrainian troops. Yeah. And my mom and my aunt are in Dnipro. It's kind of central eastern Ukraine, about 200 kilometers from Donbas. My sister came to stay with them on the eve of the invasion. Because my sister she's an ER anesthesiologist, and she works in two hospitals, one in Kiev and one in Dnipro. So she takes overnight train after a couple of weeks of working in one place. So it was lucky coincidence, obviously, because it's nice that she is able to stay with my mom. My dad passed away, unfortunately, in December from cancer, and he's somewhat lucky because right now there is no non-urgent treatment happening. Like, cancer patient, like nephew of my grandfather was released from hospital. He was in line to get adenoma surgery done. They told him, no, we can't, we don't have room, we need place for wounded. And Dnipro is relatively safe. Well, they still get hit by the missiles regularly. Like, we leave my mom's house maybe like 10 kilometers from the air base and airport, so they were hit on the 24th of February. Woke up from that, obviously, and there were other strikes since then. My sister, so she's an ER doctor, but on her free time she's fluent in English, so she's helping to coordinate foreign military volunteers to come. Like, there are groups who help people to organize from all over the world, mostly US, UK, Canada, Sweden. People with military experience, they have a free passage, and rules are very easy for them. So, and that's being supported and welcome. On the other hand, of course, Ukrainian army they got the experience after 8 years of fighting, and they are not the army that faced Russians 8 years ago. And again, they got a taste of it now, and they realize that it's not going to be an easy fight. To conclude, I'll tell you that on the Russian side, I said that at the start, when I was interviewed, I think on the 24th of February, Putin will not think too much if he have to use nukes, like maybe on a small scale. But again, Ukrainians, they will not surrender even after that, because they know what they're fighting for, and they will not be beaten into submission. And we appreciate very much the help that the Western democracies are showing to Ukrainian people and people of democratic countries like Canada, first of all, and US and Western Europe. That support is very important, and take any help we can get. Thank you.